Welcome to Driven by Dreams. Today's guest is someone who helps businesses step into their next chapter with confidence and clarity. Allie Gibson is a brand and messaging strategist and the founder of Growth Story, a studio that helps small business owners bring their brand back into alignment through storytelling, strategy, and beautiful design. Whether it's refining your voice or launching a website that truly connects, Allie brings heart and strategy to every step of the branding journey. I'm thrilled to have her here today to talk about branding, authenticity, and how to build a brand that reflects where you're going next. Hi, Ali. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, before we dive into your story and your work, let's kick things off with a quick round of rapid fire, just short, fun questions to help us get to know you a bit better.
Okay.
So, what's one word you hope people associate with your brand?
Warmth.
Where are you most creative?
Probably on my couch.
A brand you admire that gets storytelling just right.
Um, oh man, brand I admire. Patagonia.
What's the most overused phrase you see on websites?
Um, Scale your business.
One thing every About page should include.
A list of core values.
If your brand were a season, which one would it be?
Fall.
What's one design trend you secretly love or hate?
Um, Love 70s style text. Hate anything with sparkles.
What's your superpower?
Finding the link in someone's story.
Well, that was really fun. So now let's go deeper into your entrepreneurial journey. So could you share a bit about that firstly?
Yeah, I've been in marketing for a little over 10 years. I started out in PR and then went into in-house marketing at several small businesses, and then worked at a few digital marketing agencies, kind of wearing all the hats in marketing. And most recently, I was at an agency that was doing general marketing, working with a lot of tech companies and healthcare companies, and really impersonal clients who just weren't aligned with what I personally believed in. And I've always been very passionate about branding, and judging people's logos has been like a curse my whole life. And so I wanted to lean into that. I'm a writer, and so storytelling is something that comes natural to me, and I'm an artist too. So branding is kind of a combination of those two passions along with marketing. So I launched Growth Story in 2023 and went full time with it in 2024. And yeah, here we are.
Were you ever planning beforehand to be an entrepreneur? Or did it just come in your mind then?
No, and I didn't even really think about myself as an entrepreneur. For a few years before I launched Growth Story, I was doing consulting. And at that time, I was pretty much an entrepreneur without linking that to my experience. But it is funny that once you start thinking that way, or at least I now, I'm like, what other companies should I start? And what else should I do? So I started developing a kids' toy company earlier this year, and I'm working on launching a book club community for entrepreneurs with a friend of mine. And it just like opens up the possibilities for what else can I do.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that Patagonia was one brand whose branding you admire. So could you just give us a few reasons why and what things people should incorporate into their branding?
Yeah, I think Patagonia is a good example of a brand that is really loud about what matters to them and who they're trying to attract, right? So it's outdoor supplies, I think mostly clothing, but their advertising is all high like, what are they called? Athletes who do crazy things, like people who scale mountains and are skiing down giant hills, and those are the representatives they have for their brand. Those are the people they want to attract, even if it's just people who like skiing. They want, say I'm a person who enjoys going skiing and I see an ad with a professional skier going down a crazy mountain wearing a Patagonia jacket, I am now picturing myself in that situation. And so I want to wear Patagonia and be like that person. So they've unlocked this kind of aspirational marketing thing that's really powerful. And they also they're a B corporation. They have a whole giving side to their business. And I think they do a really good job of balancing how sustainability and doing things that benefit the earth are baked into how they run their business.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the biggest red flag that a brand is out of alignment, and how can someone start to fix it?
Yeah, so for context, I work mostly with small business owners. So any examples I give will probably match them more so than the Patagonias of the world. But red flags that I see when clients come to me are they are embarrassed about their website. They don't want to send people to their website because it either doesn't say what they really do, isn't clear, maybe it's just a template they bought when they launched the company. It's just not reflecting the state of their business as it is today. So usually when people, or a lot of times I should say, when people launch a business, they spend a lot of time creatively putting things together in the beginning before they're really doing any of the business stuff. And then as they start getting in the flow of the business, that creative stuff falls to the bottom of their to-do list because they're busy doing the business. So the website that they created before they knew what they were really doing doesn't say what they actually do anymore. So that's a sign that something is out of alignment. Is if you don't want to share your website because something's off with it, then we need to dig into why.
You mentioned that every about page should have a list of core values. So could you share some of the core values that Growth Story has?
Yeah, we have a few. So story or die is one of them, and that's, speaks to my infatuation with storytelling, and something I'm really passionate about is unlocking the human side of marketing and branding. I think it's kind of a natural counter reaction right now to AI generated everything, that people are really looking for ways to build a community and align themselves with the human experience. So storytelling provides a way to do that. Another core value is slow lane creativity. I do not believe in the hustle culture, and I encourage the clients I work with to not, try to push something out before it's ready. All of my projects start with strategy first, and that's a mandatory piece of anything that I do with a client, because without a strategy, you're just kind of flying blind, and that's how we end up in those situations where something's out of alignment and you need to fix something. Community is another big one. I'm really involved in the entrepreneur community in San Diego and also online in a few communities. I'm a mom, and so there are a lot of mom entrepreneur communities that I'm involved with, so that's very important to me. And I think the biggest thing is when I launched Growth Story, I wanted to work with people who I cared about their mission and what they're doing, and they're a good person and they're benefiting the world, and so that values alignment is huge for me.
You mentioned about strategy and planning everything out before you do it. I know that strategy is always important, but sometimes you're too stuck on the planning to ever take a step ahead. Mm-hmm. Has that ever happened to you? How do you face that?
Yeah, I think there's this perfectionism paralysis that happens to so many entrepreneurs, myself included, where you don't want to put anything out about your business because you feel like you haven't gotten everything in place yet. You don't have it all figured out yet, so you just stay frozen. And part of what I try to do as a branding strategist is to help my clients move into that place of action. Let's get you launched. let me take this thing off of your plate so that you can focus on developing your business and finding clients, and I'll build your website. I'll make the brand that makes you feel really proud of it. But what you're speaking to is so common. And I mean, even for me, when I'm developing new offers, I'll be like, I don't want to start teasing it yet because, I don't have the logo done, which is silly because I would do my own logo, but it happens all the time. And the reality is, to get good branding insights and brand strategy insights, you should be pushing stuff out before it's ready so you can get those genuine reactions.
Well, thanks for sharing that. What's the most common messaging mistake you see founders make?
I think two things come to mind. One is using the language that came in a template for your website, or using ChatGPT too heavily and sounding generic. I think I use AI too. I'm not shaming anyone who does, but it does have the tendency to overcomplicate sentences and pad with adverbs and extra words that when you're reading it, your brain just shuts off. It's like, this is too much. I don't really care. When someone lands on your website, you have 5 seconds or less for them to decide if they're going to stay and dig in a little bit more or bounce off the page. So your language, and especially the first message that they see on your website, needs to be super clear and concise. The other thing is, a lot of founders will speak too broadly or be too generic because they're afraid to niche and limit themselves, which is understandable. But what happens if you say you do everything is, when your ideal client does come to your website and they can't figure out what you do exactly or how it applies to them, they bounce then too because they're confused. So speaking too broadly and using too much AI limits the specific places where people can align themselves with what you're offering.
When you're making logos or websites, can you walk us through the process on how do you shape it so that your ideal customer profile gets attracted to it, wants to stay on there?
Yeah. So I think there's two pieces there. One is the design and one is the messaging, and they're both obviously very important. I don't buy too much into color psychology in how I do branding. I find it to be a little bit outdated, and putting gender stereotypes on things isn't the way anymore. But there are certain colors that turn everyone off, like bright pink and bright green, and colors that hurt your eyes, colors that are really low contrast so you can't read what's on the page or you can't tell what's going on. Those are red flags. So finding a way to have a neutral palette, it doesn't need to be a boring palette. I mean, Girl Story's brand color is a bold yellow, but it's knowing how to balance accent colors with colors that work well with people's eyesight. That makes a good design. And then the other piece is with messaging on the website, making sure that it speaks directly to the story.
When should a founder not rebrand? Are there times where staying on the course is better?
Yeah, I don't know how often this happens, but if you're rebranding just to rebrand, that's not a good reason to rebrand. If you're working with someone who's just going to make you a logo, that's not a good reason to rebrand. And the reason is, it needs to be based on strategy. Even really funky, bold branding needs to have a strategy behind it. Otherwise, you're just putting something out there for no one to see. And that means knowing who the audience is, what the goals of amplifying the brand are, what the vision for the company is as a whole. All of those things are important to figure out before you launch into a full rebrand. You might have a logo that's just fine, doesn't need to be changed, but you need to shift your positioning or your messaging on your website. And I like to call those like a brand revision. It's not a full rebrand, we're just making little edits. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So, why do you think storytelling is such a powerful tool in branding?
Um, like I said before, I think this counter reaction to AI is, and we'll see people gravitate more towards things that align with them, because when something is generic, you're less likely to give it the time of day. So storytelling, and let me just define how I think about storytelling when it comes to branding. It's not about saying your story as a founder. It's not, I did 10 years of marketing before I launched Growth Story. It's more, I care about increasing visibility for women founders, brands, so that they can show up confidently. Like speaking directly to the emotional pieces that people can align their own story with. That's what I mean about storytelling. So it's just a movement away from generic and away from template, away from overly corporate language into language that actually resonates with real humans.
You mentioned some of the downsides of AI. Is there any way AI can help make storytelling and branding more authentic instead of less?
Yeah, I mean, if writing is not your strong suit, then being able to idea dump into ChatGPT or one of the other ones and saying, please position this as a emotionally resonant story for my target audience of blank, and then you tell it who your audience is, it will shift the language so that it is better written, right? But then you have to go in and edit out the AI isms from there. So I think it has a place for sure. I think it's a very useful tool. It's when it's overused or used without any copy edits that it becomes an issue.
You mentioned simplifying stuff on your website is very important. I was talking to someone about this recently where their company language, they used some big words, right? And when other people in that same space are reviewing it, it doesn't seem anything too hard to understand, but you can't really understand how the customer is thinking about it. So do you help people break that down as well? And how do you do it?
Yeah, for sure. I always remind people like to think about how they consume information and what resonates with you when you're scrolling Instagram, for example, and you start reading a caption. Are you really going to sit there and read a paragraph of text, or are you looking for something that's like quick hit? This is what this is about. This is what I do. This is who I help. Our brains are moving really fast, right? Reels are like 6 to 7 seconds long. We're looking for information really quickly, so simplifying is key. And one way that you can simplify a very wordy elevator pitch or key message or even your website copy is to say it out loud. And if you're saying it out loud and you're like, this is a lot of words, or I don't need this adjective here, take it out. Like, no one's going to miss it, And I think that's another thing when you're using AI to generate that stuff. And you put in all the information about your brand and say, create an elevator pitch for me. It will spit something out that will be so amazing and beautiful, and you'll be like, wow, I can't believe that exists. But then when you say it out loud, you start to realize that it doesn't sound like a sentence you could actually say in an elevator, right? So we got to think about ways we can simplify it in that way.
You mentioned Patagonia, their branding, it really reflects their mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure a client's visual identity truly reflects their personality and their mission?
So I personally start all my projects with something called a brand clarity session, which is a 90-minute interview. It's basically, I ask a ton of questions and the founder or their team word vomits for 90 minutes, and we go through their positioning and differentiators, their story, what they care about, who they're serving, who they want to attract more of, what the goals are for the company and the brand and the website. And then I take all the information that they give me and I find the key messages in there. And it's through that conversation that I can pull out the individual threads, the little bits of their personality. And then later on, when we're in the design process, I get some high level creative preferences from them, and we'll create a few mood boards or creative directions for them to choose from. So by the time we actually get to the logo design process, I have a pretty good idea of what it is they're looking for and how a brand could encompass the personality they're going for.
Thanks for sharing your process. What's one piece of the brand strategy process that people often skip but shouldn't?
I think most people skip the brand strategy, period. Like it's a tough sell, especially when you are an early stage founder, because you are spinning a million other plates. But it's a costly thing to skip, because if you do pay someone to create a website for you or design a logo and you don't really do much thinking, you're like, my favorite color is purple and I like a lot of animation, make that for me. And then a couple years in, you're like, I don't know why no one is booking meetings with me through my website. My ideal client hates the color purple and they are turned off by animations because it's not accessible design. That's why. There was no strategy behind the initial launch, and so now they're in a place where they have to repay to get all of that done in a way that makes sense. So any kind of brand foundations up front, any kind of work you can do to set up an idea of your target audience and your mission and vision and the positioning and how you are different from competitors, anything you can do up front in that way will save you so much money later on.
What's the biggest myth about building a website that converts?
Probably that it needs to be overly fancy or designed. There are some website builders out there now that people are attracted to because they give a lot of customization abilities and animation, and you can have graphics anywhere, and it's really fun to build like that. But the reality is websites still need to be highly accessible by law, and because that's how people will convert through them. So it needs to be optimized for mobile. It doesn't need to be super fancy. It needs to be really direct in what you want people to do with it, whether that's setting a meeting or buying a product. So I think it's natural to want to over-design a website, but it comes back to putting more weight in the strategy.
Yeah, I know. I'm more of a strategy person. My sister is more creative. So when she's looking at some of the flyers I make, she's like, focus on more of the creative part. So how do you balance that? I'm guessing you're more of a creative person. Do you ever have that urge to keep overly designing?
Yeah, but I think that's good that you and your sister have, like, you can balance each other out in that way. And I think I do balance myself out in that way too, because it's both sides of my brain. So I'm a very creative person, but I also have the marketing background to lean on for all the strategy and foundational elements. And balancing it's more of like, this is a necessity than anything else. Things don't have to be ugly. Things don't have to be boring. Strategy doesn't mean boring. It doesn't, and brand clarity doesn't mean boring either. It just means you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about. You could be saying something really outlandish, but you know what it is, and you're repeating it over and over again.
You mentioned how AI is changing branding currently. Where do you see branding evolving over the next few years, especially for small businesses?
Well, I hope that I think people are becoming more conscious of what's created by AI. I hope that we move away from AI logos because they all have a little something that is off to them and they're not based in strategy. I hope that we are moving toward radical authenticity and being really loud about the things that we care about and attracting the customers that we want to attract and pushing away the customers we don't want to work with. And that goes back to putting more emphasis on storytelling. I think that if you want an engaged audience and you want to emphasize community building through your branding, it's better to be authentic and genuine in your branding rather than staying vague or impersonal.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation today, Allie. Before we wrap this up, do you have any final words of wisdom?
Um, I always say that when it comes to branding, and I think you can apply this to your life, everything happens in iterations, everything happens in chapters. Nothing is the final chapter. Launch before you feel ready and then keep adjusting as you grow.
Well, thank you so much, Allie. I've really enjoyed hearing about your journey and your insights, so thank you.
Thank you.